Prepare to have your mind blown. We're about to unveil a collection of jaw-dropping discoveries that have sent shockwaves around the globe. From ancient artifacts that rewrite history to scientific breakthroughs that defy belief, these astonishing finds will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about our world.
This story comes from a cafe in Hong Kong that did a lot of delivery orders to customers' homes. One day they received an order for 4 meals and they brought it to the address they were given. The customer only opened the door a crack, sliding the money through and telling them to leave the food on the floor. When they checked the register that night, they discovered the money they were given had turned into hell money, which locals use to burn for use in the afterlife. This happened a few more days in a row, every time going to the same home and the money turning into hell money. Each time the customer would never fully open the door or reveal themselves. Finally, the owner decided to report it to the police, and when they entered the apartment they discovered that the residents weren't actually alive, instead finding 4 dead bodies on the floor. They were able to tell that the bodies had been dead for a significant amount of time, but still had food in their stomachs from the cafe that was only recently digested. Number 9. Sea monster. In 2018, tourists on a beach in Vietnam were shocked by an apparent sea monster that had washed up on shore, one person filming it and uploading it to YouTube for more people to see. The creature is incredibly strange looking, and to me it looks like a bundle of alien twigs or something. The tour guide themselves admitted that they had no idea if it was an animal, a plant, or even something alien. A lot of commenters believed that this was some sort of mysterious alien creature found on Earth, as no one had ever seen anything like it before. Many people speculating that it might be only in its early stages of development and could grow into something bigger and scarier. As it turns out, it's apparently just some sort of scary deep sea starfish, and they ended up returning it to the water. And I will honestly never get over how terrifying and alien looking some deep sea creatures are. Number 8. Seven Sisters Rock. This one is another one that comes from Hong Kong, and it's the story behind the Seven Sisters Road. The story goes that there was a group of 7 women who lived near the area, and together they took a vow of celibacy, which means never getting married or ever being physically intimate with someone. Through their pact they became blood sisters. However, the third sister's family refused to go along with this and organized for her to be married off, preparing the ceremony. Because of their pact, the night before the wedding ceremony took place, all 7 women drowned themselves in the river. The villagers in the area were never able to find their bodies, but the next time the tide receded, they discovered 7 large boulders all in a row. As a result, they were named the Seven Sisters Rocks. Years later, a swimming space was built called the Seven Sisters Swimming Shed, but any late-night male swimmers there would end up drowning mysteriously, the 7 sisters reportedly haunting the space. Number 7. Haunted Tomb. Before I start this one, I am just gonna say yes, Israel is in Asia, and yes, I did have to Google that. Go easy on me, it's been a while since I last took a geography class. A group of researchers were doing excavations in an old cemetery in Israel when they discovered an ancient tomb. What shocked them the most, however, was the grave marker for a man named Jacob the Convert, who died around 1800 years ago. The inscription on the grave was written in human blood, and was a warning that nobody should ever open the tomb, stating that anyone who does so would be cursed. What type of curse isn't detailed, but curses are typically never a good thing. The people who found it walled off the area with stones and halted their excavations. Getting cursed probably wasn't in their contract. Number 6. Cursed balls. More cursed things from Israel. Let's take a look at this pair of cursed balls. And yes, I did pick this one because I think it's funny to say cursed balls. During excavation near the Israel border, archaeologists discovered these 2 ballista balls, which were basically ammunition for a big crossbow that fires rocks. A few years later, the balls went missing from the site, but unfortunately nobody actually noticed. 20 years later, the balls were returned and found on the site once again, along with a note. The thief who stole them apparently had bad luck and believed that the balls were cursed. He said that when he brought the balls home, his successful business suddenly failed, his family abandoned him, he went into severe debt, and apparently many other issues. He didn't realize until it was too late that his bad luck was caused by a bunch of bad balls. So he returned the balls to the site, and we can only assume that his bad luck ended.
So we've all heard of Neanderthals, but there were other early human species, some of which were roaming around at the same time as us as well. One of these were the Denisovans, which were only recently discovered in 2010. Out of all the types of archaeological finds, I think discovering a new subspecies of archaic human would be the most fascinating. It's just wild to think that at one time there were different species of humans living on the planet. An ancient female finger bone had been found in a cave called Denisova in Siberia in 2008. In 2010, mitochondrial DNA was extracted, which pointed to the bone coming from an undiscovered species, now known as the Denisovan. Also inside the cave were Neanderthal remains, meaning the two species may have coexisted. The Denisovans lived across Asia from 285 to 25,000 years ago and would have interbred with modern humans, as there are small traces of their DNA in us today, mostly in Malaysians and Aboriginal Australians. They also interbred with Neanderthals. In 2012, in that same cave in Siberia, the fossil specimen of a young half Denisovan, half Neanderthal female was discovered, which they named Deni. She's the only first-generation hybrid hominin that's ever been discovered.
For many years, it was believed that slaves were forced to build the pyramids against their will, under the harsh conditions of the desert sun and in fear of extreme and painful punishment. Well, according to a recent discovery, that might not have actually been the case. At the turn of the 21st century, an ancient cemetery was discovered in Giza that historians believe disprove the forced labor theory and instead support a much more peaceful illustration of the past, in which workers were able to take breaks at will and were actually praised for their service in creating the Great Pyramid. So why do they think this? Well, because the cemetery revealed that those who died while working on the Great Pyramids were given honorable burials close to the royal tombs they helped to construct. Persons found in the cemetery had also been buried with gifts, such as jars of beer and bread, to aid them in their journey to the afterlife. If they were slaves, they would have received no such luxuries. The simple discovery has changed historians' entire understanding of social class in the deserts of ancient Egypt.
These Indonesian cave paintings may be the oldest in the world. In 2014, a bunch of ancient cave paintings were discovered in a cave in Sulawesi Island. They were determined to be between 40 to 50,000 years old, making them thousands of years older than the oldest known cave art at the time. Before this discovery, it was thought that the oldest cave art had been created in Europe, but based on the findings in Indonesia, that's clearly not the case. As archaeologist Adam Brum, who discovered the painting, stated, it adds to the evidence that the first modern human cave art traditions did not arise in Ice Age Europe, as long assumed, but an earlier point in the human journey. The paintings are pretty spectacular too. It's all pretty clear considering how ancient it is. There are human-like figures, there's these three big pig-like creatures, tons of human hand stencils. I mean, how amazing would it be to step into a cave and look at handprints made by people living 50,000 years ago?
In 2021, a trail of fossilized footprints changed historians' entire understanding of the timeline of human migration. The footprints were discovered in what was once, around 23,000 years ago, a salt lake and what is now the Tularosa Basin in New Mexico. It was shocking to say the least, because the discovery meant that humans had arrived in the Americas up to 10,000 years before what was previously thought, meaning that they would have interacted with ice-aged animals like mammoths and saber-toothed tigers. Saber-toothed tigers being my personal favorite extinct animal. The fossilized footprints disappear and reappear annually with the shifting sands of the basin, so they are not always available for viewing, unfortunately. But if you would like, you can see an exact replica of the groundbreaking discovery at the Tularosa Visitors Center.
In central China, archaeologists discovered stone tools that changed what they previously thought about early early human migration. The tools found at a site called Shangshen are about 2 million years old, a lot earlier than the previously oldest known tools found in Eurasia, which were around 1.85 million years old. Between 2004 and 2017, a team of geologists dug into a slope in central China. They found 96 stone tools in different layers of sediment. The tools were left just where they had been used, making it kind of easy for them to date them accurately. The tools included sharp-edged flakes for cutting and chunks of rock that had been used to make them. Before this find, the oldest known human fossils outside of Africa were found at a site in Georgia, dating back from between 1.85 and 1.77 million years ago. The tools at Shangshen are about 250,000 years older than that, meaning that clearly humans left Africa and reached central China much earlier than we thought before.
Number 5. Gonjiam Asylum. Now let's swerve into a few buildings that were discovered to be apparently haunted. The first is Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital in South Korea, touted as the most haunted place in the country. It was opened in 1982 but closed only 14 years later in 1996, being left empty and abandoned. The story goes that many of the patients at the hospital were disappearing mysteriously, people believing that the owner of the hospital was actually keeping them hostage there and treating them poorly, running away to America when the families and authorities started looking into it. The doctors there apparently became just as insane as the patients, and due to their tragic deaths and unfinished business, the angry spirits of the doctors and patients now haunt the broken down facility. Many urban explorers and ghost hunters report large amounts of paranormal activity and seeing apparitions of the patients within the halls. Number 4. Prince Gong's Mansion. Over in China, one of their most haunted locations is Prince Gong's Mansion, owned by an official of the Qing dynasty who was known to be incredibly corrupt. He lived there with his wife and his harem of around 80 ladies. One of his only redeeming factors was said to be his devotion to his wife. When she became incredibly sick after their son passed away, he did everything to try and figure out a way to cure her, including hiring monks to pray for her health. Unfortunately, they apparently discovered that she was dying of a broken heart, and this was unable to be cured by any method. So unfortunately, the woman would soon pass away. The mansion is now said to be haunted by her spirit, as well as other women that the prince was involved with. Most of the reports say that you can hear his wife crying late at night, and security guards have reported seeing apparitions of women in white dresses wandering through the halls. Number 3. Soccer team. This one was probably one of the most talked about news stories at the time, even worldwide, and you'll probably remember it once I start talking about it. Back in 2018, a group of British divers were in northern Thailand when they discovered an entire soccer team flooded and trapped over 2 miles inside of a cave. The soccer team had been led to the cave by their coach, who had visited there before. It was supposed to be only a quick expedition lasting around 2 hours, so they brought only flashlights, rope, and batteries, not any food or water. But when a monsoon hit, they became trapped inside, and 2 hours turned into 2 weeks, surviving off water dripping from a stalactite and chanting mantras in order to stay calm. Fortunately, all 12 players were rescued over the course of 3 days and survived, only one rescue team member losing their life in the effort. Number 2. Airplane Graveyard. One place to visit in Thailand that many people probably don't know about is this airplane graveyard. Starting in January of 2010, large scrapped airplanes just suddenly started showing up on a chunk of private property next to an auto body shop in Bangkok. In 5 years, many large planes were added to the graveyard, and soon after, it was discovered that 3 separate families had taken up residence within the planes. The planes are clearly broken down and have been stripped for their parts, making the site look like the eerie location of like a giant multiple plane crash. The families that lived there used the planes as a source of income, taking the parts to be sold and making money off tourists who come to visit. Some of the planes include 2 Boeing 747s and 2 MD-82 jetliners. Gaining access to the property will run you around $5, so if you're in Thailand and interested in planes, maybe consider checking it out. Number 1. Hybrid Creature. And we are continuing to stay in Thailand for this final entry on the list, which is a strange creature found in a remote village that had people absolutely baffled. Footage of the creature shows it laid out on a table surrounded by people. It appears to be a young buffalo, but it has the skin and scales of a crocodile. Many people believing that a crocodile and buffalo somehow fell in love and created this hybrid creature which died shortly after it was born, which is a pretty common occurrence for hybrid animals. The buffalo had previously birthed plenty of normal calves before, so they didn't think it could have been just some passed down genetic trait, truly believing it must be mixed with a crocodile. The villagers had it laid out on the table because they believed that the creature would bring them good luck. Whether or not it actually did, I'm not sure, and other people online believe that the whole thing was just a hoax.
For so long, we have viewed Neanderthals as brutish, barbaric, and kind of unintelligent, but a recent discovery in Spain has led historians to believe that there might have been much more to our hairy cousin species than previously thought. In 2010, a collection of decorative shells dating back to up to 50,000 years ago were discovered in a cave in southern Spain. The shells had been colored and pierced with holes, likely so that they could be worn as jewelry. What does this discovery tell us? Well, that ancient Neanderthals had the capacity to think symbolically and create intricate works of art, making them much smarter and more in touch with their emotions than ever imagined. Other archaeological finds such as rock art, seafaring technologies, evidence of navigation, long-distance interactions, and ceremonial burials present in the Neanderthal world have also supported this theory. In fact, some people believe that Neanderthals were actually smarter than us, but that we were more ruthless, and that's why we're here today, and they're not.
It seems like Indonesia really may have been the birthplace for visual art. In 2014, scientists found something really surprising in Indonesia, a shell with geometric patterns engraved on it. This shell, discovered on a riverbank, was dated to be at least 430,000 years old. What's amazing is that these patterns aren't even believed to have been created by modern humans at all, but Homo erectus, an ancient human species we never thought had the capacity for artistic expression. Before this find, we didn't think Homo erectus had the ability to create art or think abstractly, and this discovery may have changed that, showing that this proto-human species may have actually had complex cognitive abilities, and that art actually predates modern humans. Maybe etching things into rock, or in this case shells, didn't just come about with us. Instead, it seems that even our distant relatives like Homo erectus had the capacity for creativity, which is actually kinda nuts to think about.
Perhaps one of the most important artifacts used to rewrite, or more accurately, properly understand history would be the Rosetta Stone, which is not just a language learning software, but a broken part of a larger stone slab with the same message carved in 3 different types of writing. Before the discovery of the stone, Egyptian hieroglyphics were completely undecipherable. But because of the fact that one of the messages on the stone was written in ancient Greek, and historians knew how to read ancient Greek, scholars were able to decipher the previously illegible Egyptian hieroglyphics and uncover many of the secrets of ancient Egyptian civilizations. The story on the stone told of an ancient royal cult and the first anniversary of the cult ruler's coronation. The translation of the Rosetta Stone led to the translation of all ancient Egyptian texts, including pyramid and coffin inscriptions that describe burial practices and class structures within ancient Egypt. Without it, we would be completely lost when it comes to the who's who and what's what of ancient Egyptian, well, everything.
This next discovery is super recent. News about it just came out in April. So just outside the city of Limoges, researchers from the Institute of Preventive Archaeological Research, or INRAP, found remnants of a Roman-era pool and wall surrounding a natural freshwater spring. What's exciting is that this site might be even older, dating back to the Neolithic period, around 4,500 to 6,000 years ago. The Romans built their structure on top of what was likely a sacred well from ancient times. The site included Roman coins, ceramic fragments, and a ceramic depiction of what looks a bit like Medusa, placed near the water source for protection. The second discovery was about 9 miles southeast of Dijon. INRAP uncovered a site that was likely used by humans from the Neolithic period to the Iron Age. At the center of the site, a mysterious monument with 3 interconnected enclosures. A circular enclosure, a horseshoe-shaped one, and an almost square-shaped one. Nearby, they found a necropolis with 5 circular burial enclosures dating back to the Middle to Late Bronze Age. Inside there, they found artifacts like copper alloy pins, ceramic fragments, and a necklace with around 40 amber beads.
In late 2022, a discovery made in an ancient religious sanctuary near the village of San Cassiano dei Bani in Italy challenged everything historians knew about the relationship between the Etruscan civilization, which dominated ancient Italy, and the Romans. Originally, it was believed that the Etruscan civilization fell to the expanding Roman civilization in the late 14th century BC after being defeated in war, but a hoard of 24 Etruscan and Roman statues discovered side by side in the dirt might just be rewriting that story. The statues date between the 2nd century BC and the 1st century AD, and they depict gods and replicas of human organs, and they would have been tossed into what was once the thermal waters of the small village of San Cassiano dei Bani by individuals hoping to rid themselves of their ailments. The mix of the statues shows that the civilizations actually had a close relationship, close enough to pray together and even to share sacred prayer sites. A fascinating discovery connecting two civilizations previously believed to have been sworn enemies with limited interactions outside the parameters of war. Starting off our list today with the Frankenstein bog mummies. In 2002, a team of archaeologists discovered two bodies in Scotland, belonging to two people who had died 3,000 years ago before being thrown into a bog where they were preserved and mummified and then buried 300 to 600 years later. One was the body of a man and the other the body of a woman, or so they thought. Upon closer inspection, researchers quickly realized that something about the skeletal remains of both bodies weren't quite right. The man's limbs seemed out of place and the woman's jaw was slightly too large for her skull. Fast forward 10 years to 2012, and researchers discovered that they didn't find the body of two people, but the body parts of at least half a dozen. The woman was made up of body parts from people who had all died around the same time, while the man was made up of parts belonging to people who had died up to hundreds of years apart. Not only that, but evidence suggested that when the parts were put together, they would have still had mummified flesh on their bones, which is unpleasant to say the least, but it's a super dark and incredibly interesting discovery.
So this is incredibly cool. Archaeologists in Crete may have recently come across the most famous labyrinth in all of history, the labyrinth that was said to hold the Minotaur from Greek mythology. The Minotaur was a fearsome creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, which lived in a labyrinth on the island of Crete, as the story goes. So this 4,000-year-old labyrinth on the island of Crete may have been the actual inspiration for that ancient story, which is amazing. The labyrinth was found on Pompeii Hill, and it's the first structure of its kind discovered in the area. The Greek Ministry of Culture says the Minoan civilization built it between 2000 and 1700 BCE. It has 8 circular stone walls arranged into a maze formation, and some parts of the walls are still standing up to 5.5 feet high. The structure is divided into 4 sections by internal walls, creating a series of passageways, and inside there's a small circular building, also divided into quadrants. Now, aside from the labyrinth's potential connection to that mythological tale of the Minotaur, they're still not 100% sure what it was actually built for, but they did find a bunch of animal bones that may have been used for rituals and offerings. Either that, or animals just wandered into the maze and then were never able to make it out. That's always a possibility as well.
Next up, we have a mass grave discovered in Slovakia just 2 years ago, in 2022, containing approximately 35 skeletons, the majority of which were missing their heads. The grave dates all the way back to 5000 BC, and researchers believe that the bodies excavated from the site likely belonged to the victims of sacrifice. Due to the grave site, which is essentially just a large ditch's proximity to a defense wall, archaeologists studying the find have theorized that the decapitated individuals were killed in the hopes that their sacrificial deaths would strengthen the wall and therefore provide safety to the communities living in the area. Many of the skeletons found belong to people who died around the middle or near end of their pre-adulthood lives, I'm talking 20 and under, which indicate that they might have been sacrificed for their strength, stamina, and agility.
In 2015, archaeologists made a pretty remarkable but unsettling discovery in Flanders, Belgium. They uncovered the bodies of 125 World War I soldiers in a perfectly preserved German trench system. So this area had been untouched since the war ended, hidden beneath what is now a housing development. Most of the soldiers were German, but there were also British, French, and South African men. The soldiers fell during some of the fiercest battles of the war. Some of their remains were found right where they had died. Others were buried in mass graves by their comrades, often with religious artifacts. And the site was about the size of 2 football fields on a ridge known as Hill 80. This ridge saw intense combat, especially during the First Battle of Ypres in November of 1914, where a lot of German soldiers died. The area was later taken by British and Irish troops in June of 1917, but then the Germans retook it again in 1918, leading to even more casualties on both sides. There were more personal items as well, like watches, religious items like crucifixes and rosary beads, and there was even a bottle of HP sauce, which just goes to show that these were real people, you know, making food. And I think a lot of times when we look back on these wars, it's easy to disconnect from the fact that, you know, they had HP sauce they were cooking with. Makes it all seem more real.
A 300-year-old child mummy starts this list off in at number 10. The body of a child that died 300 years ago apparently opened up her eyes in a video. Let's take a look, but it's pretty creepy, I must warn you. Her body has been preserved in wax, and people in this village treat her as a Catholic saint. The video was taken on December 12, 2012 by a tourist who couldn't believe his eyes. Some pessimistic people believe that this video is a hoax, while others think that paranormal activities is responsible for her eyes opening. Either way, I think it's kind of creepy to have a little girl who was murdered preserved in wax for hundreds of years and have her displayed in a church. I think she should be able to rest in peace. Rolling into number 9, we have the Bosnian sphere. This mysterious sphere was discovered in a forest near a Bosnian town, and people believe that this rock could be the oldest stone sphere that was made by humans. The ball has a radius between 4 and 5 feet, and it has an extremely high iron content. One scientist believes that this sphere proves that there was an advanced lost civilization that dates back more than 1500 years ago. He also believes that this region used to have a lot more of these spheres, but they were ruined because people thought that there was gold hidden inside. Either way, the discovery of the sphere means that there could have been an ancient civilization that we have no written records for. And it also shows us that they were highly advanced and had the technology to create something like this before humans ever walked the earth. Fighting into number 8, we have Venetian vampires. Back in 2006, the skeleton of a woman from the 16th century with a brick in her mouth was discovered in Venice. Historians believe that the remains might have belonged to someone who was accused of being a vampire, and this might have been the first vampire burial known in archaeology. Back in the day, people believed that vampires were behind the spread of plagues, such as the Black Death, so they were heavily feared. Gravediggers would sometimes come across corpses that were bloated, their hair still growing, or blood seeping from their mouths. So they believed that they were still alive, and that's why they would perform a vampire exorcism and then bury them with bricks in their mouth. It's kind of disturbing to see what we used to do in the past, and I wonder what future generations are going to say about us. Pits of severed hands brings us to number 7. A team of archaeologists have dug up the skeletons of 16 human hands that were buried in 4 separate pits in Egypt. Oh, and all of them were the right hands, no lefties. Most of the hands were actually really large. Apparently soldiers would present a cut off right hand of an enemy in exchange for gold, and they also use this as a way to count how many victims that they have killed. This ritual also was significant because they believed that by cutting off an enemy's right hand, you are taking away their strength and power. For me, if they cut off my right hand, that'd be a big mistake because I would still have strength and power because I'm left-handed. So, The Mount Owen Moa claw brings us to number 6. This insanely large claw was discovered in the caves of Mount Owen located in New Zealand. Archaeologists were really surprised when they found this claw because it was extremely preserved. The flesh and muscles were still attached to it. When they took this massive claw back to be examined, it was later concluded that it belonged to the Moa bird, which was a wingless bird that disappeared from Earth 2,000 years ago. Can we just take a moment to appreciate how big this claw is? It looks big enough to pick up a grown man.
This avian colossus roamed the forests, standing over 2 meters tall at the shoulder, and with the ability to reach heights of 3 meters when extending its neck.
The moa was a heavy bird that measured up to 12 feet in height, and it weighed nearly 250 kilograms. They went extinct because of excessive hunting by humans. If you want to see this ginormous claw in person, you can actually do that at the Natural History Museum in New Zealand.
Next up, we have a pretty macabre discovery made in 2019 during an excavation that took place in Selangor, Ecuador. Along with the remains of 11 people who would have been buried at the site and multiple ancient artifacts were 2 helmets made from human bones. Skulls, to be exact, and young ones too. Apparently 2 of the young bodies they found were wearing the skulls of other slightly older young people over their heads like some kind of disturbing medieval bike helmet. I shudder to think of what they might have used for straps. While it is unknown why the helmets were placed onto the heads of the young bodies, it is assumed that it was likely done so during the time of their burials as part of a ritual designed to protect them in the afterlife. However, other theories suggest that the young bodies were buried as part of a ritual meant to calm an active volcano nearby, i.e. they were sacrifices. It's pretty dark.
So when you look at this image here, you probably assume this poor guy died instantly being crushed by this boulder, right? Well, it turns out that may not be the case. Don't get me wrong, he still died horrifically though. In fact, he went out in a much worse way. This is the body of a man who's been dubbed the unluckiest man, and he died in Pompeii during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Archaeologists recently removed the boulder to examine the remains and found that the dude's skull was surprisingly intact. The Pompeii Archaeological Park made a statement about the discovery, saying, quote, "The identified skeletal remains consist of the upper part of the thorax, the upper limbs, the skull, and jaw. His death was presumably not therefore due to the impact of the stone block, as initially assumed, but likely to asphyxia caused by the pyroclastic flow." So this dude was trapped under a boulder. Yeah, I'd say he really lives up to his name. Yippee for him.
Next up, we have the Sandby Borg killings discovered in 2010 during a study of a 5th century Swedish site in the island of Åland. While excavating the grounds, an archaeologist stumbled upon the ruins of an old home, and while exploring the home, they came across a human skeleton. At first, they wondered why it wouldn't have been given a proper burial, but then they came across another, and another, until the remains of 26 people were counted by the team, all showing signs of having died at the same time due to execution-style killings. It became apparent then that a mass killing event had taken place in the home sometime between 450 and 550 AD. Also found in the home were fossilized half-eaten fish, coins, and jewelry, supporting the theory of an ambush attack. But there was no evidence to suggest who carried out the killings or why.
Here's a pretty strange recent find: plastic rocks in nature. Scientists have been looking at Brazil's volcanic Trindade Island for years, but just in 2023 there was an unsettling discovery: rocks made from melted plastic debris. The island has always been a nesting ground for green turtles, but now it's also home to these strange plastic infused rocks. The plastic rocks are being called plastiglomerates. Plastiglomeratus? Well, they're formed from a mixture of natural sediments and plastic. So they form on plastic waste, mainly from fishing nets apparently, melts and combines with the natural material on the beach. Geologist Fernanda Avelar Santos said the place where we found these samples is a permanently preserved area in Brazil, near the place green turtles lay their eggs. This makes the discovery even more alarming as it highlights how pervasive plastic pollution has become. She continues, "The garbage in the sea and the plastic dumped incorrectly in the oceans is becoming geological material preserved in the Earth's geological records." Interesting to see what'll happen like 100 years from now when this continues to happen.
Next up, we have a discovery made in 2003 by a group of archaeologists exploring the Atacama Desert of Chile. A mummified skeleton that at first glance looks a bit like it belongs to the body of someone or something that did not find its origins on this planet. I mean, it has 10 ribs instead of 12, giant eye sockets, and an incredibly elongated skull that ends in a point. For decades, UFO enthusiasts were convinced that the skeleton belonged to an alien, so much so that the mummy mummy was actually featured in a 2013 UFO documentary. Unfortunately for the believers, in 2018 the alien theory was debunked when good old DNA testing decided to join the party. Turns out the genes were 100% human, and the body belonged to a young female living 500 years ago with severe genetic bone mutations. Or so they say.
And finally, we have Oramumuru. This place sounds really intriguing to me. So Oramumuru is a rock formation near Lake Titicaca in Peru, which has some very strange stories attached to it. So this massive stone structure is often referred to as the Gate of the Gods. It stands about 23 feet tall and has a perfectly carved 7-meter high rectangular niche in its center. So the question has always been, though, what is the origin of this place? What was it made for? Local folklore tells tales of the pre-Inca civilization, suggesting that Oramumuru is a gateway to another dimension. According to the legend, Oramumuru was an ancient priest who used a golden disc known as the Key of the Gods of the Seven Rays to open the portal and pass through it with his followers, never to be seen again. But archaeologists and researchers, of course, have their own theories. Some think that the place is a ceremonial site, possibly linked to nearby Tiwanaku culture, known for its advanced understanding of stone carving and alignment with astronomy. Until this day, though, the true origin and the purpose of this place is still relatively unknown. But what makes it even weirder is that there are a number of stories of people going missing around here. There are also reports of a strange bluish glow coming from the area.
Moving on to number 5, we have a massive finger. Okay, no, seriously, take a look at this thing. This is huge! This is a huge mummified human looking finger that measures in at 38 centimeters in length. How long are my fingers? Like, well, probably like 5 centimeters. This thing is way bigger than my fingers. Many people believed that this was a hoax, but upon further research and examination, scientists have given it a certificate of authenticity and X-ray images. Researchers from Egypt believed that this huge finger belonged to a creature that was over 5 meters in height. The owner of the finger was apparently a grave robber that found this thing while searching through a tomb in Egypt. Well, hopefully this creature isn't still out there roaming the earth looking for its next victim. Nazca lines makes an appearance in at number 4. The Nazca lines are famous worldwide that can be found in the southern desert region of Peru.
Pilots began reporting mysterious and spectacular signs etched in the desert floor. After several decades of dead-end theories and talk of UFOs, the Nazca lines remained an enigma.
These lines are massive drawings in the soil, and they're known as geoglyphs. These designs were carved sometime around 1 to 700 AD, and some of them are up to 1200 feet, and there are over 300 of them. The designs are all very different. Some of them are spirals, or there are more intricate ones that are shaped like animals or flowers. They are best seen from above, like in a plane or satellite. The Nazca lines were designed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994, but their origins still remain a massive mystery today. Some archaeologists believe that they're used as some sort of astronomy related purpose. Some believe that they were used in some sort of ritual, and there are some people who believe that aliens are behind the Nazca lines. But no one knows anything for certain. Mohenjo-daro lands into number 3 on our list. This archaeological site is considered to be one of the best examples of ancient alien contact. Ancient astronauts theorists claim that thousands of years ago, advanced alien civilization visited Earth and they set off a lot of nuclear bombs in order to destroy this city. The ruins of the city were discovered in 1922, and they were able to see hundreds of skeletons scattered around the city as if some horrible event had just taken place. These bodies were some of the most radioactive ones ever found, and it is believed that this ancient city in Pakistan was destroyed in an instant by an incredible explosion that could have only been by some sort of atomic bomb, which is super strange considering that the city was built in 2600 BC. Floating into number 2, we have alien skulls. Residents in a small Mexican village of Onaves, they made a shocking discovery while they were trying to build an irrigation canal. They found deformed skulls that were wrapped into strange looking alien heads in a 1,000-year-old cemetery. There were 25 human burials, and 13 of them had these strange looking alien heads. They thought that these corpses belonged to an unknown species. Their skulls were elongated, pointy at the back, and their teeth were mutilated. When people came in to investigate this discovery, it was later concluded that these skulls belonged to humans, but their heads were mutilated in some sort of ancient ritual. And now at number 1, things get really creepy with Gråbale Man. The corpse looks like he was taken from a horror movie. He was discovered in a bog located in Denmark back in 1952. Experts believe that his throat has been slit and his remains were dumped in a bog sometime in the 3rd century BC, which is over 2,000 years ago. They also believe that he was some part of ritualistic human sacrifice. The Gråbale Man is considered to be one of the best discoveries in Denmark prehistory. Because his body is exceptionally preserved, they were even able to take the man's fingerprints, and that's because his body was in really good condition.
Starting off our list today, we have the Screaming Mummy, one of the more disturbing archaeological finds of the 1800s. In 1886, wow, this is not a recent find. In 1886, head of the Egyptian's antique service Gaston Maspero unwrapped what is now known as Man E, or the Screaming Mummy. Man E was found inside of a plain coffin wrapped up in sheepskin, which is already strange considering the fact that most mummies were wrapped in fine linens, and according to experts, sheepskin was considered impure by the ancient Egyptians. Not only that, but this corpse had not been properly embalmed, just left out to dry. Also, both of the mummy's hands and feet were bound. And then there is, of course, the matter of its expression, a contorted scream, which have led archaeologists to believe that Man E was in a great deal of pain at the time of his death. Not only that, but other evidence has brought researchers to the conclusion that Man E might have been a prince, and the son of the pharaoh Ramses III. Ancient papyrus scrolls reveal that the pharaoh's family, army, commanders, servants, and wives had planned to kill him. It also says that conspirators were captured and tried. While at first it is believed that the mutiny was unsuccessful, a CT scan of Pharaoh Ramses III showed that he actually likely died after his throat was cut. If that really is the case, and it was his son who killed him, that would explain why Man E was not only killed, but also terribly dishonored in his death.
Next up, we have one of the most exciting things you could ever hope to find in one of the Egyptian pyramids, a secret chamber. So in early March of 2023, Egypt's antiquities authorities unveiled a pretty remarkable discovery. It was a sealed off chamber inside of one of the Great Pyramids at Giza, dating back approximately 4,500 years. The chamber was found using advanced scanning technology on the northern side of the Pyramid of Khufu. They found that the corridor is about 30 feet long and over 6 feet wide, situated above the pyramid's main entrance. What makes it even more interesting is that it's not accessible from the outside. So what is the purpose of this chamber, or what was the purpose? Archaeologists are still not sure, but the hope here is that this tunnel actually leads to King Khufu's burial chamber. Interestingly, this is not the first discovery of a mystery chamber in this very same pyramid. Back in 2017, scientists found a sealed off corridor, a 30-meter chamber inside of Khufu. So there were various scanning techniques used here, including ultrasound measurements and ground penetrating radars employed to locate this chamber. Christian Gross, a leading member of the project, said he's hoping there could be even more secrets in this pyramid, and I, for one, agree. Alright, I got a new Bigfoot video for you guys. This video was posted to TikTok by the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization with the description reading, "Alleged trail camera footage has emerged of what appears to be a giant black Bigfoot throwing trees and destroying a potential crime scene where it is said human remains were located." So this is a pretty clear video. The creature is obscured by trees, but we do get a nice long look at it, and just like the description says, whatever this thing is, it's picking up big logs and hurling them around like they're nothing. Take a look. Yeah, that ain't no bear. The way it like picks it up and just like slams it down like that. If I saw some hairy thing slamming a log down in the middle of the woods, I would be booking it right out of there. There are a few things that make this video convincing. For one, the clear strength the thing seems to exhibit. One commenter wrote, "I had a tree business before, so I know the weight of logs, and that would take extraordinary strength to do that." I also like that this footage was supposedly taken with a trail camera. If this had been taken by some hiker in the woods, I'd be wondering why they stuck around to film when it's pretty obvious you'd be running for your life. Anyway, what do you all think of this one? Hoax? Genuine? Let me know down in the comments.
Next up, we have the shocking discovery of Coal Brings Plenty, an actor best known for his role on Into the Wild Frontier, as well as his work on 1923 and The Tall Tales of Jim Bridger. Plenty was last seen on March 30th of this year, driving his white Ford Explorer out of Lawrence, Kansas. He was reported missing the following day. After receiving a call about an empty vehicle matching the description of Plenty's, police canvassed the woods nearby where it had been left. And on April 5th of this year, 2024, Coal Brings Plenty was found dead. While the cause of death has yet to be shared with the public, police insist that they will continue to investigate the passing and provide more information as time goes on.
Aliens in Brazil. So this is a bit of a weird story. Just back in January, hikers in Brazil captured some strange figures looming over them at the top of a hill. Figures who they believed to be of extraterrestrial origin. And I will say, whatever these things are, they don't look human. I mean, not quite. There's something just kind of off about them. The footage was captured on an island about 285 miles down the coast from Sao Paulo. In the video, we see a beautiful hillside, but perched on top are two tall humanoid figures silhouetted against the sky. And considering how far away they are, they look to be pretty tall. The people who posted the video said they were about 10 feet tall. Now on top of that, their bodies just look weird. They're very slender, and zooming in on one of these things here, yeah, just take a look at how long that arm is. I mean, sure, the image is blurry. Maybe it's just kind of distorted. Or maybe, you know, Slender Man was on vacation in Brazil. It does have a bit of a Slender Man kind of look to it. Now, if you're wondering, oh, maybe these were just like, you know, scarecrow type things at the top of the hill, you do actually see them move a little bit in the footage, and they don't move naturally either. I don't know. Could totally be a hoax. Could also be genuine. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
Next up, we have another body found in the woods, this time just off of Richmond International Raceway, a car racing track located in Henrico County in the state of Virginia. Around 4 p.m. on April 25th, a man visiting the track went to use the washroom when he noticed a strong smell. When he followed it, he discovered the body of an unknown man or woman that, according to reports, was not skeletal but had likely been in the woods for an extended period of time before being discovered. Of course, seeing as this is incredibly recent, there is not much information on the case, other than it seems as though the body was left there intentionally. Police have yet to release the cause of death or any other identifying information on the deceased, probably because they don't know. They did state that they are sifting through missing persons reports in an effort to identify who the victim might be. Next up, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but what would 1,000 words be worth if your tongue was made of gold? Why do I ask? Well, because in 2021, it was reported that archaeologists had unearthed a handful of 2,000-year-old mummies with, wait for it, golden tongues. The mummies were found at Alexandria's Tapiceris Magna Temple. There were 16 of them, poorly preserved, buried in rock-cut tombs that would have been popular in the Greek and Roman eras. It is likely the golden tongues were placed into the mouths of the individuals so that they would be able to speak before the court of the god Osiris, the god of the underworld and the judge of the dead. In one of the tombs, Osiris was depicted on the linens encasing one of the mummies. In another tomb, images of a crown, horns, and a cobra snake were depicted around a mummy's head, and a symbol of the god Horus, the god of kingship, healing, protection, the sun, and the sky, was found on the same mummy's chest. The very same excavation turned up ancient funeral masks with golden flakes dating back to the Greek and Roman eras, as well as a number of coins adorned with the name and portrait of Queen Cleopatra VII, the last ruler of the Egyptian Empire.
Next on the list, we have the discovery of mysterious L-shaped structure underneath the Giza Pyramid complex. A team of archaeologists from Japan and Egypt found something really cool near the pyramid complex of Giza. They used ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, to explore the area beneath Giza's western cemetery. The GPR works by capturing wave reflections from underground, and then it creates three-dimensional images. Between 2021 and 2023, they focused on a flat, empty part of the cemetery that strangely didn't have any tombs, but they suspected something was down there. The area had a different density from the surrounding soil, and the shape of whatever this anomaly was made it clear that it was man-made. The radar data showed two underground structures, one shallow and one deeper down. The shallow one, shaped like an L, is about 33 feet wide and 49 feet long, lying 6.5 feet below the surface. The deeper structure is about 16 to 33 feet underground and covers about 33 square feet. The archaeologists were pretty excited because the shapes and the layout of these structures didn't seem like natural formations. It looked like they'd been built by humans. As for exactly what's down there, research is still ongoing, but if it's an underground facility of some kind, there could be tons of artifacts and remains and who knows what else.
Next up, we have something that is not so much scary as it is super cool. In 2016, Ann Austin, an archaeologist at Stanford University, began inspecting the body of a 3,000-year-old female mummy, only to discover something incredibly unusual, for the time that is. The woman's neck was covered in markings. At first, it was believed that they had been drawn on after the woman died, in lieu of placing physical traditional burial amulets on the body. But upon closer inspection, Anne realized that the markings were permanent and that the woman had been alive when she received them, making the markings the oldest representative image tattoos known to man. Earlier markings found on other mummies were made solely up of abstract dots and lines. After thoroughly inspecting the rest of the mummy's body, Anne found 30 separate inkings across the woman's neck, back, arms, and shoulders. This girl was yadded up. Sorry. Images of eyes, snakes, lotus blossoms, and cows, often associated with the goddess Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, music, dancing, fertility, and pleasure, were all present on the body. The mummy was subsequently nicknamed the Priestess of Hathor, and it is believed that the images were etched into her skin during a religious cult activity.
Just this year, a 4,000-plus-year-old ancient Egyptian tomb was discovered, along with a bunch of really cool artifacts. Once again, this was a team of Egyptian and Japanese archaeologists. Now, during their expedition in Saqqara, they found a 4,000-year-old tomb. Inside were the remains of a man buried with a colorful mask dating back to the Second Dynasty, around 2649 to 2150 BC, making him over 4,000 years old. They also found a coffin from the 18th Dynasty containing a well-preserved alabaster vessel. There were also burials with artifacts like terracotta statues, one depicting the goddess Isis, another statue was Hippocrates, the god of silence and secrets. The team also found a bunch of amulets, pottery models, and pieces of broken pottery called ostraka, which were etched with inscriptions.
Alright, this next one is just gross. By now we should all know that mummies and the process of mummification was, in ancient Egypt, an incredibly sacred cultural practice. The process of embalming was meticulous and consisted of 9 stages. 1. Insert a hook through a hole near the nose and pull out part of the brain. 2. Make a cut on the left side of the tummy and remove all internal organs. 3. Let the internal organs dry before placing the lungs, intestines, stomach, and liver inside decorative jars. 4. Place the heart back inside the body. 5. Rinse the inside of the body with wines and spices. 6. Cover the corpse in salt and let rest for 70 days. No, this is not a recipe for a souffle, or whatever it might be. 7. Stuff the body with linen or sand to give it back its human shape. 8. Wrap the body from head to toe in bandages using resin to form a seal. And 9. Place the mummy in a sarcophagus. What I want to focus on right now is stage number 8, which utilizes resin, which Europeans mistook for bitumen, which they believed to have healing properties, which led to wealthy Europeans purchasing ground up mummies and consuming them. The health benefits were non-existent, and the whole thing was super gross. Oh, and in the late 1800s, when mummies became too hard to acquire, bodies of deceased, dehydrated criminals were used instead.
Next up, we have the Pit of Hands. Archaeologists have found a number of severed hands in ancient Egyptian tombs, and it's believed that these severed hands were actually war trophies. So back then, it wasn't uncommon for victorious warriors to collect all these grisly souvenirs from their victories. Many historians believe these hands were ritually severed as part of a ceremony, likely to signify the defeat and domination of their enemies. But why hands specifically? Well, hands were symbols of power and agency in ancient Egypt. By removing them, the victors were not only physically disabling their enemies, but also symbolically stripping them of their ability to resist or fight back. It's hard to fight without hands. In one case, a number of these severed hands were found in pits during excavations of a palace near the ancient city of Avaris. These pits contained hundreds of severed hands that were all neatly stacked together, and the largest pit was right in front of the throne room. They seem like they were pretty important. There's even ancient Egyptian artwork depicting soldiers possibly trading severed hands for gold. Some also speculate they could have been depicting offerings to the gods.
Next up, we have the possible discovery of Queen Cleopatra VII's tomb. We are so close, I could taste it, but not in the way Europeans did in the 1800s, because that's gross, but this is incredibly cool. In 2022, a 1,500 meter long, 1.8 meter high tunnel was discovered beneath an Egyptian temple that project leader Dr. Kathleen Martinez believes may very well lead to the lost tomb of the last ruler of Egypt, who was born in 70 or 69 BC and ruled as co-regent for almost 30 years. Inside of the tunnel, located in the area of the Temple of Tapizaries Magna, west of Alexandria, 2 carefully crafted stone heads were found that only furthered Dr. Martinez's belief that she must have stumbled upon Cleopatra's tomb, which has always been rumored to be located in the area. If Dr. Martinez is correct in her assumption, she may have also found the final resting place of Cleopatra's lover, Mark Antony, who is believed to have been buried alongside his lover, Cleopatra. Romantic.
And finally, we gotta talk about cursed tombs. Pharaohs made it very clear that they didn't want their tombs being broken into, so they'd inscribe them with curses. Didn't really stop anyone, but they are pretty ominous. And there have been some pretty eerie cases of archaeologists and tomb raiders having pretty bad luck after encountering them, or even dying soon after. The curses often threaten lifelong torment, not just for the trespasser, but for their entire family as well. One of the most famous examples is, of course, the curse of King Tut's tomb. When British archaeologist Howard Carter opened the tomb in 1922, several members of his team died under mysterious circumstances shortly after the discovery, leading some to believe that the tomb may have actually been cursed. The curses weren't vague threats either on these tombs. A lot of them are just very blunt, with statements like, "His flesh shall belong to the fire," and "Your entire family will be eaten by crocodiles," and that sort of thing. Maybe not something scientists look at and are all that afraid of, but definitely something that would make me second guess going in there. Next up, we have a jogger who captured a pretty creepy image and didn't even know about it until later. A runner named Kay Borlees was on an endurance run with the Hawaiian ultra running team. During a particularly harsh stretch of the loop, full of tree roots and water crossings, she ended up injuring her foot and had to pull out of the race. Her pacer, Cassie, had been capturing images the entire time though, so she had some photos to show her friends and family. As she scrolled through the images, something caught her eye though, something that sent a shiver down her spine. It looked like a ghoulish figure had been peering out at her from the brush. Take a look. Kay posted her story along with the images to Reddit, and they were blowing up recently. And it makes sense, because that is a pretty creepy image. It looks like a zombie is walking through the woods there. Both Cassie and Kay didn't remember seeing anyone else on that part of the trail, saying tourists weren't out that early. We didn't see anyone for hours while running together, so we were, and still are, positive there was no one there.
Next up, we have yet another body discovered in the woods near Vietnam Veterans Memorial Bridge in Lewiston in Maine. On Friday afternoon, on the 3rd of May of this year, a body was found inside a tent in the wooded area beneath the bridge. Authorities were called and police arrived at the scene shortly after, around 4:30. Of course, as is with everything on the list, this is incredibly recent. I mean, you did click on a video about disturbing things found in 2024, just 5 months into 2024. So there's not much information. What has been released to the public though is that the body was removed from the area and brought to a medical examiner. The person's identity as well as the cause of death remains unknown.
One of the creepiest things about the woods to me are all the noises. Through the dense vegetation and the sheer size of some forests, you never really know what could be lurking out there. So when you hear something like this, yeah, it makes you pretty uneasy. That sounded like the werewolf howl from An American Werewolf in London. If you've seen the movie, you know the one. Not what I want to hear while trekking alone through the forest. The video was taken in a forest somewhere in eastern Canada a few months back. Now, it being the Canadian wilderness, there are tons of things that could have made a sound like that. Doesn't make it sound any less frightening though. It could be a moose call. But have you ever seen a moose up close? They're gigantic. And there's also the possibility that it is a Sasquatch call. Can't write that off either.
Next up, believe it or not, is not a dead body, just an incredibly creepy abandoned home filled with creepy and decrepit knickknacks. Earlier this year, 2 Canadian urban explorers stumbled upon an abandoned home while exploring in Ontario. As the explorers entered the home, they were greeted by a doll sitting on the staircase, and many other vintage dolls and toys were scattered around the house, some in okay condition for an abandoned house, that is, and some not really. Many stuffed animals had been ripped to shreds and strewn across the floor, making for a pretty eerie sight. As the explorers made their way through the home, they were greeted in each and every room by another pair of lifeless, unblinking doll eyes. One of the explorers even said that it was the strangest abandoned house they had ever seen, and that it was also super creepy. If you have a fear of dolls, I wouldn't suggest seeking this place out, because I don't know, you might pee your pants.
This next story comes to us from Reddit. It was posted about 6 months back from a now deleted user. I hope they're okay. It goes as follows. Hey everyone, I need to get this off my chest. Something weird happened to me yesterday and I can't shake the feeling that I was being followed. So I decided to take a hike in the ravine near my house. It's usually pretty quiet, but yesterday things felt off right from the start. About halfway into my hike, I started hearing twigs snapping behind me. At first I thought it was just an animal, maybe a raccoon, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. I shrugged it off and kept walking, but I kind of felt like I was being watched. Then I started to hear footsteps. Not the rustling of leaves or the scurrying of small animals, but distinct footsteps, like someone was walking right behind me. I stopped. I looked around, but again, nobody there. At this point, I started to feel really uneasy. I picked up my pace, hoping to shake off whatever was following me, but the footsteps kept getting closer. I could almost feel someone breathing down my neck. I broke into a sprint. I didn't stop until I burst out of the ravine and back onto the street. When I finally caught my breath, I glanced back at the trees, half expecting to see someone standing right there, but there was nothing. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but I can't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in there.
And finally, we have the discovery of a 22-million-year-old forest located in the Panama Canal. And while this discovery is not spooky scary, like unknown beings and unsolved deaths, it's scary in the sense that it reminds us that we really know nothing about the planet that we live on. Earlier this year, scientists discovered a 22-million-year-old forest that had previously disappeared after a volcanic eruption. They discovered remnants of of the forest on Barrow, Colorado Island after noticing fossilized trees on the island that they believe were likely all buried and fossilized by volcanic lava flow in the same massive event. The fossilized trees represent a species of mangrove previously unknown, and it is believed that they can grow to be upward of 131 feet tall, which is wild considering modern-day mangroves generally grow to be only about 20 feet.
Well, next time you guys are exploring in the forests, please do be careful, and if something does happen to you, don't forget to write it down for us to share.
Let us know. Alright, you guys, have been your host, Hannah Thompson.
I've been your host, James.
See you next time.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about the creepiest glitches that Alexa has made, and yes, we're talking about the Alexa in your home. Viewer discretion advised. Don't forget to turn off your own Alexa. Click the video now and we'll see you guys in that next video.